Jaya Tvam Devi Chamunde, Jaya Bhuta Paharini, Jaya Sarvagati Devi, Kalaratri Namostute. Jayanti Mangala Kali Bhadrakali Kapalini, Durga Shiva Ksham Datri, Swaha Swatha Namostute. I bow down and surrender to the goddess. Glory be to you, O Chamundi Devi, the remover of all the afflictions of the world. Glory be to you, all-pervading goddess. Glory be to you, the one who is of the nature of darkness at the time of delusion. I bow down to you. Goddess, you are the most superior and ever victorious. There were 6 stages from birth to death, and you remove all of these. You deluge everything at the time of dissolution. You give happiness and peace. You are the one who resides in the forehead, in the hands, etc., of the creative force at the time of pralaya, potential. You are the one who removes obstacles of the devotees. You are pure consciousness. You are compassionate. You are the support of all creation. Nourisher of all the primordial elements, the one who pleases all entities. We bow down to you. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karvavahe Tejasvinavaditam Astu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our studies lead to illumination. May we not unnecessarily cover with each other. Peace, peace, peace beyond all. So in the wake of the end of the series of the story of Rama, the Ramayana, and in the same kind of vein, I wanted to see what is the next thing that we could do that is around a story or a group of stories. And of course, the most obvious choice would be the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavata Purana is a Purana. What do we mean by that? We've just studied the whole story of Rama. This is classified as Itihasa. That means a historical account. So we need to refresh our memory and understanding to see what all the different scriptural references are that we use in a universal Vedanta philosophy with various helpful addendums. Well, the first point of reference, obviously, is what we call Prasthanatraya. We start off with the Vedas. The Vedas are said to be expired, not inspired. And we are more interested, of course, in the Jnana Kanda, the knowledge portion contained in the Upanishads. So we may as well say we're interested in the Vedanta, otherwise known as Upanishads. Upani, Shad, the inference sitting near a teacher. We can imagine it's sitting at the feet, but that's not implicitly and that's not explicitly told. So these are great, great profound principles and learnings, but extremely abstract. And because of the abstract difficulty grasp for the ordinary person, because these are summaries of profound, deep conversations and conclusions of all our investigations as humans. What is the nature of the cosmos? These are scientific questions now. What is the nature of ourselves? When we explore consciousness, these are relevant questions now in this day and age. But really, they have always been the same questions. And so this profound reference to this world as Jagat, the thing that changes, this is the point of view from the very ancient sages who were interested if something changes, the inference of something static must be there, something that does not change. And not to address that would be to escape the very substratum of existence itself. Now, it was really because of this complexity and this abstract nature and this astute necessity for learning, expanding these principles with a teacher, hence the name Upanishad, from a teacher, not only originally, but in continuance. We find various schools of thought emerging from these Upanishads, and therefore various commentaries are there. But for the ordinary person, how do we encapsulate all of these principles together? And so in the meditation, the Gita Dhyanam, we see at the very beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, the picture that Krishna is milking a cow, and the teats would represent the Upanishads, the flow of milk are these Upanishads. In other words, creating some kind of comprehensive garland that would be reconciling many different positions, and also put in a beautiful form, Gita, meaning a song or a philosophical poem, longest philosophical poem in the world. But from this, we could get some nice glimpses. And then, of course, you have the other leg, if you will, of the Prastantraya, that is the Brahma Sutras, that systematizes everything and deals with many difficult things that arise in dialectics, in dialectical discussions. And this, of course, is extremely abstract. So of these three things, we really have the Bhagavad Gita, but many people don't even know what these principles are because, again, since they are in the form of stanzas, they have to be expanded on. And when Shankaracharya made his commentary on the Bhagavad Gita, he made effectively the Upanishads accessible to everyone. Still, it requires commentaries. Still, it requires teaching. What about the other person, the person who has not much learning and not much time, a person like us who wants something much more simplified, still something that can be inserted into the character and personality of a child? And so we have this whole body of work called Puranas. So many of them are there. Vishnu Purana, for example, will be there. Today, of course, Mahalaya, the beginning of a season dedicated to the divine in the form of Devi, hence my recitation at the beginning. So this is a wonderful story that is delineated in a few different places. The most popular might be something called the Devi Mahatmyam, or the Chandi, and I quoted 2 verses from that at the very beginning. To visualize something, even to visualize the Supreme and bring it into human terms, and to make things interesting and multisensory, this art and skill conveys the truth at the simplest level. And of course, we can't leave it there because every child will start thinking and questioning and wondering, are these just stories? And of course, we can't say they are just stories. We have to say that there is a meaning. So all mythology will have some kind of meaning. And the Bhagavata Purana has for centuries been one of the favorite religious texts of India. Many people get asked, what are the scriptures of India? Of course, being so many, having such a vast array of literature, some find it very difficult to pinpoint what it is. It doesn't occur to them that it is the Vedas. But you see, the Bhagavad Purana is charming because it has attractive stories. And for those people who have a busy schedule, even from, let's say, the 10th century, we assume that their body of work was concluded around about the 10th century of our current era, and the rise of such devotional elements from Ramanuja and those kinds of people who really wanted to bring out the heart, get away from the head, and get into a real human contact with people in an age where feeling is a necessary component in the human psyche. And not only that, but relationships, relationship with a living, breathing, real God entity that is not far away, but is nearer and dearer to us than even a relative. And so there are all the favorite stories in the Bhagavatam. Stories which some of you may know even from your childhood. Stories about Prahlada, Dhruva, the King Bharata, many, many more. Stories of rishis and kings and heroes and avatars and devas, asuras, a whole compendium of actors on an interesting stage. And along with these stories, the Bhagavatam also presents very, very relevant teachings. The Bhagavatam, of course, is most known for the stories of Krishna's life. Most of our understanding about Krishna's life comes from here, from his birth in a dungeon in Mathura to his passing away at Prabhas. And almost all these stories are included in all these, of this text, the Bhagavatam, from his childhood in Vrindavan, his youth in Mathura, his last years in Dwaraka, all of these things. And so this is all to be found in this comprehensive volume. And so it's natural that having studied the Ramayana, we see that along with the Bhagavad Gita and the various versions of this Ramayana, even a version of this Ramayana is contained in this Bhagavatam. It is been the main text, this Bhagavatam has been the main text of the Vaishnava school after, let's say, Ramanuja. And as I say, it probably was composed in its final form anyway, around about over 1,000 years ago, the 10th century. Now, it's greatly influenced by the Advaita school. And people get confused about this Advaita, Vishishta Advaita, Advaita. What does it mean? 3 possible approaches to the absolute are necessary. To put it very simply, most religious studies or investigations or relations or practices start off with putting a circle around yourself and putting a God outside it, far away. You can bring him out on a Saturday or Sunday, depending on your religion, or even a Friday, and worship. And maybe once a day we can bring him up, or twice a day, or something like that. Definitely in distress, we have to bring this remote overseer in. Well, it's not entirely a bad idea. It's a good starting point, because it tells us that the truth of the divinity within us and through us and beyond us is in practice far removed from our understanding, since it's obliterated or it is overrun and obscured by all our secular interests about work, about relationships, about political scenarios, economic scenarios, and now with increasing exposure to the world through media, we now have additional information that probably brings our mood right down. Because no news is good news, according to some, and there's a perpetual sense of underlying anxiety that is produced by us wanting to know what is going on. And as soon as we find it out, we're not happy about it. Very rarely is good news broadcast. So we require these kinds of mythologies and these kinds of stories, these kinds of teachings to uplift us and bring us closer to the reality that underlies everything, that our religion calls, whatever it is, Bhagavan, Ishvara, God, Allah, Lord, etc. and bring that being from outside our exclusive circle and make it part of it. It comes as a realization. The more we study, the more we get closer to it, the more we realize its value and its worth, its intrinsic operation through everything. We begin with it is outside, then we bring that inside. And in bringing it inside, we now have more of a feeling that it is part and parcel. We are part and parcel of it. This is Ramanuja's position. Now we have gone from dualism to a kind of qualified non-dualism, or what we might call in philosophical terms, panentheism, as opposed to pantheism, panentheism, a situation where we realize there's no smoke without fire, that we are somehow a spark of the divine. We are involved. We are part and parcel of the wave that is going on, the divine wave that is expressed in and through nature. And that's a very, very beautiful encounter, because what it means is that every time we breathe, we shouldn't take it for granted. We should feel this presence within us expressing itself. Every time we talk, we should be thankful and marvel at the wonder of speech. But all these things we generally take for granted. So when there's a revelation that delights the mind, when we see this divinity, not only in ideal circumstances, such as trees and flowers and the sky and daylight and forests and seas and so on, all of these are delightful, but also in every single thing. Even in the darker corners of the world, we should be able to see it. Until there's ultimately a realization, the first position of dualism, where we intensify the inwardness of things. We bring it, you see, the outside is not even dualism. Putting that being outside our scope is at best just a superficial insurance business. But when we bring it inside, that's the first step. This is really the dualistic worship aspect that is advocated by Madhva. Then Ramanuja expands on this, deepens our feeling, and says, yes, you can see it in everything. Now can you see it flowing through everything? Can you see we're a part of everything? Can you see a holistic aspect where there's no real separation? When one atom dances, all our atoms dance. We can feel part of this. What a wonderful experience. Until ultimately Advaita, where a realization, initially coming as a flash, there are no two, and it comes as a positive experience of pure being. So if you have something like a scripture, it has to have the scope of pretty much all of this, but it has to culminate in this Advaita. And there's a great confusion to think that these are two separated points of view. You're either this or you're that. But every position is a supplementary position. And the highest conclusion of our Vedanta will be this Advaita. So this Bhagavatam Purana naturally includes this, and also at the very, very most profound level, but through stories. So in spite of this non-dualistic theology, in this Bhagavatam, it's also heavily influenced by songs of ecstatic love written by the Alvas, written by the Vaishnava saints of Tamil Nadu, who lived between the 6th and 9th centuries of this current era. And the Alva songs, they set a new standard for devotional fervor and for poetry. Loving devotion became ecstatic devotion. Devotional poetry became sublime lyricism. And so the influence of the Bhagavatam can clearly be seen if we compare sections of the older Vishnu Purana, also Purana, with those in the later Bhagavatam. And though, of course, most of the stories in the Bhagavata Purana are basically the same as in that earlier text, the Vishnu Purana, You can see the relationship between now not just the devotees and the Lord, but the Lord and the devotees. And this takes a new turn in the Bhagavatam. And thus it brings about a change in the teachings and also in the philosophy. It's a renaissance, it's a new text, it's a rebirth of an interest in philosophy. Let's take, for example, the stories that may be well known to you of Prahlada. Let's take the stories of the gopis. Their minds become so absorbed, both of them, in the thought of the Lord that they feel they are the Lord. This nearness becomes oneness. And then they start imitating some of his actions. And so this is the key to mystic experience, where in our spiritual life, this nearness, the sense of nearness, even if you feel it occasionally, when it's perpetuated practice, it becomes a sense of oneness. So why are stories in general, and why are these stories so important? Well, myths and religious stories are actually pointers to another realm, a divine realm. They raise our awareness away from this mundane physical plane with all its apparent problems. It takes us to a higher plane of consciousness. And sometimes is done through very obvious teachings, things that yes, that makes sense. And sometimes through allegories, but often they do it by working on a deeper level. It's not just stories. It's a deeper level of our consciousness that these work on. We're hardly aware of the impact they make on us. The 11th chapter or the 11th book of this Bhagavatam is often separately taken aside and published for its profound philosophical insights. And we see there within it the story of the Avadhuta. And we see that it would be an example of not only a story, but containing obvious teachings. Also, the story of King Bharata, which is given in the 5th skanda. See that the teachings are actually spelled out. And in terms of allegories, the Bhagavatam is unashamedly admits that the story of Puranjana in the 4th skanda is actually an allegory. It states it. Now then, we don't have a dilemma that is often there in theology. The dilemma that, well, let us take, for example, the Judeo-Christian Genesis, Adam and Eve and so on. And people are debating, should we take it literally or not? Well, very clearly, only when it comes to, I think it's Augustine, does he clearly state, this is an allegory. But here in the text itself, it's saying it's an allegory. Now, one of the most wonderful examples of the third kind of story or myth, and that really works on a deeper level of our consciousness, is the story of Markandeya. And it's a story I intend to relate to you today. It's given almost at the end of the 12th skanda. It's the type of myth that has no particular meaning that we can give to it, but it speaks of a mysterious spiritual experience. It works on the subtle level of our mind to awaken our spiritual consciousness. But of course, there are other stories. So I think it was Carl Jung who made the comment about mythologies that there are not enough of them. There are not enough stories that really tell us anything. I think he says that the lack of development of myth in Western civilizations is a pity. He says our myth has become mute and gives no answers. The fault lies not in it, as it's set down in the scriptures, but solely in us who have not developed it further, who rather have suppressed any such attempts. The original version of the myth offers ample points of departure and possibilities of development. And so we are fortunate to have this rich fabric of myths in the Indian culture, which is offered not only to us as the philosophy of Hinduism, but also to the whole world. So, with that kind of introduction, I'll just expand a little bit more. See, all these myths and symbols that are rooted in India, they resist the temptation of intellectualization. They forget about the reduction to fixed significations. And so, if you did treat it in an intellectual way, you would only sterilize them of their magic. And so, when we tell these stories, we're really looking for a certain element of wonderful, wonderful, joyful magic. So, this whole Bhagavatam, we should point out, is really around a story related by Shukadeva. So it's worthwhile just giving you the background to this from the first book. Anyway, it begins like this, that long ago in the Naimisha forest in India, Shaunaka, along with some other rishis, decided to hold a religious ceremony that would last for many years, which many other saints and holy people could partake in. Now, in those days, there were saintly minstrels, singers, who sang and recited the holy Puranas. We can compare them to folk tales with a religious significance. Scriptures. And these scriptures give stories of various aspects of deities. Gods and goddesses, unfortunately translated like that, but anyway, this is all to do with mythology and what they mean. And these storytellers were called suttas. And there was one great sutta, Ugrashrava, the son of Ramaharshana. He was one of them. Now, when he arrived to take his part in the ceremony, all the other saints and sages and holy people were delighted. And with great, great respect, they asked him, please recite the stories of Lord Hari, especially of his divine play as Krishna. Now we understand the theme of the Bhagavatam and why it's so precious to the Vaishnavas. And so Sutta Ugrashrava was delighted, and he said, well, look, when you ask about Bhagavatam, the story of the one called Krishna or Vasudeva, you are talking about the story of the Supreme Being. Immediately he's elevating people's minds. The Vedas find their fulfillment in Vasudeva. The goal of all sacrifice is Vasudeva. The fruit of all yoga is Vasudeva. Vasudeva alone is the goal of all. And so it begins like that. So naturally, during the Bhagavatam, the incarnation story is told, King Parikshit and so on and so forth. But the whole thing begins in this way, as somebody telling the stories. Let us come now to the story of Markandeya. So through the discourse of Shukadeva to Parikshit, once it was over, then Shaunaka and the other sages wanted to hear much more. And so they asked the sutta to tell them the story of one remarkable sage, the life of Markandeya, who was said to be immortal. And so Sutta said, well, Markandeya, the son of the sage Mrikanda, he practiced intense austerities. He did it even from his childhood. Now, what do we mean by austerities? It tells us every day after worshipping Lord Hari, you recognize, see, Hari means something that is yellow or something that is stolen, a thief. It infers as a thief. And so this is the wonderfully poetic way of saying that the Lord steals our heart. And for this reason, we have within, entrenched within the mythology, we have Krishna as a small child stealing the yellow butter. As a thief, he steals our heart. Anyway, every day worshipping Lord Hari, he would recite the Vedas and then collect alms for his teacher. And only when permitted by his teacher would he also eat from that food. And it's said that due to his devoted worship of the Lord, he was able to conquer death. In other words, the path of bhakti yoga, has the capacity to give us immortality. Gradually, through his long observance of continence and austerities, he was able to fix his mind one-pointedly on the Lord in meditation. This is the goal of all our meditation. And most meditation may well be devotional meditation. There are many other kinds of meditation, but the easiest is, in the words of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, and repeatedly fix your mind on me. And in this way, 6 manvantaras passed. This is a rate of time within the system of cycles. So for such a long, long time, eras and eras, he was immersed in meditation. Now don't ask how he could, for eras, do this. This is a story. At last, Indra became frightened. Indra, the chief of all the deities, became frightened, thinking that Markandeya would take over his position. So he decided to send some apsaras, Gandharvas, and others, heavenly nymphs and delightful temptations to the sage during his meditation. But all their attempts failed. Now anybody who meditates will know these things will come naturally. Your external life intrudes when you try to settle it and steer it toward the divine. Anyway, Markandeya was a seasoned meditator, and so all these attempts failed. And he was completely unfazed by this. And so Indra had to admit defeat. You can philosophically or psychologically put Indra as the mind. And so, not even the least bit of anger arose in Markandeya. He didn't say, why are you trying to do this? Why are you trying to upset me? And so the attempt by Indra to lure him away from his meditation failed miserably. And delighted at seeing Markandeya's total dedication to him, the Supreme Lord appears to him in his dual form as Narayana to bless him. Seeing these two manifestations of Vishnu before him, that is in human form, and also in that subtle energetic form, the formless aspect of it, Markandeya falls at their feet and begins to sing a hymn of praise to them. And then, pleased with his great devotion, the Lord tells him to ask for a boon. This is the typical trend of a story, that once we increase our devotion or our spiritual activity, then the universe gives us gifts. It opens up a divine grace for our benefit and that of all. And it depends on our thinking as to what we would wish for. And in case of the sage, what could he possibly want? Because all his desires had been fulfilled now with the vision of the Lord. That was his aim. Anyway, at last Markandeya said, look, I have a desire to experience your Maya, by whose power all the worlds and everyone perceive duality in your non-dual being. This alone is a profound statement. You see, I have a vision of you, but your glory is called Maya. And it is Maya is the power that creates the worlds, but it also gets us to perceive duality in it. And just to repeat an oft repeated phrase of mine, I say, what we see as this world is fragmented divinity, seeming fragmented divinity. I have to add that. And so the Lord grants his prayer and smiles as he disappears. For while others pray for freedom from Maya, let me get out of here, the sage was asking for an experience of Maya without any fear. And Markandeya then remains at his ashram waiting for his prayer to be fulfilled. I once was visiting devotees in Kilkenny, I think it was, and one person who was studying this Advaita philosophy said, well, we should get rid of Maya. They obviously never read the story, you see. So what is this world? 19th century mystic Ramakrishna describes it as the mansion of mirth. We shouldn't try to get rid of it. We should try to understand it and then use it. So what is it? Curious to know. Now, he's asking a most profound question that is asked in modern science, because the whole of modern science is exploring Maya, and we happen to know from scripture that Maya is inscrutable. We can never understand Maya. Anyway, one day, a violent storm came in. Torrential rain pours from the sky, and with no let-up. Day after day, it goes on and on and on, and gradually all the rivers, all the lakes, and all the oceans overflowed their banks until the whole world was covered with water. And this deluge is something that we find in many, many mythologies, from Sumerian mythology to what we call Abrahamic history and so on and so forth, Noah and so on and so forth. Many, many people will mark down a historical deluge of some kind. So the whole thing, all the banks, the whole world was just covered with water, no land in sight. Markandeya alone remained floating in the water. And everything and everyone else had been submerged. The whole world was dark. And for eons, it seems, he floundered in the waters of the deluge, exhausted, no food, overcome with grief and delusion, just darkness, in the words of, you might say in the Vedic words, darkness covering darkness. And at last, after thousands of years, Markandeya spots a bit of land raised up above the ocean. There, on that island, he sees a banyan tree. And coming closer, the sage spots an infant lying on a leaf in the middle of the tree. And all Markandeya's exhaustion and grief disappear at the sight of this beautiful baby. Dark green in complexion, who was lying there, sucking his toes. And then with some hesitation, Markandeya approaches the infant to speak to him and make a small sound. But as soon as he gets close, he's drawn into the mouth of the baby. Even stranger, Markandeya sees the whole universe just as it has been before the deluge. And inside the stomach of that baby, everything is the same. And just as he was wondering about all this, Markandeya was pulled out of the baby as the baby breathed out. And again, Markandeya was back in the deluge. But the banyan tree with the baby was still there. And Markandeya understands that this baby is actually the Lord Vishnu. We have to understand Vishnu means that one that pervades everywhere. So the baby was actually Lord Vishnu on whom he had meditated. And the baby smiled at him with a sweet divine smile. And Markandeya again approached him to embrace him. But in the instant, the baby disappeared. And so also did the banyan tree, as well as the whole deluge. And then the next moment, Markandeya finds himself back in his ashram as if nothing has happened. The whole thing is the Lord's Maya. And sometime later, Lord Shiva and Uma come to the ashram. They find Markandeya in meditation. When Markandeya opens his eyes, he saw the divine couple before him and prostrated himself at their feet, singing a great hymn of praise. And knowing of Markandeya's suffering at the time of his experience of the Lord's Maya, Shiva praises his devotion to the Lord Hari and told him to ask for a boon. And Markandeya replied, all I can think of, may I have unfaltering devotion to Sri Hari, to thyself, and to all devotees, because there's no difference. Vaishnavite, Shaivite, they can argue, they can fight, but Markandeya sees it all as the one being. And then Shiva says, all that you have asked for is granted. And besides this, your fame will last forever. And that's why we're telling the story, because he was famous. And moreover, you should live a life of total renunciation and illumination until the cosmic dissolution. Cosmic dissolution means that according to the cosmology, all of the existence was projected. We call the material existence is projected, the whole universe, and will be withdrawn into a condition of dissolution, either totally or locally. But when you go into this cosmic dissolution, you will retain the knowledge of your past and present and future. And then with the devoted salutations to Lord Vasudeva, Sutta concludes this Bhagavatam Purana, leaving the story almost to the end, therefore. And of course, the final conclusion will be related to the story, no doubt. Now, we can dwell on this story, we can meditate on this story, and because it's an extremely profound story, and we can review the fact that Vishnu is in the guise of a divine child, and address him, welcome Markandeya, and to dwell on the voice itself had the soft, deep tone of melodious thundering of an auspicious rain cloud, we're told. And the assurance comes, welcome Markandeya, do not be afraid, my child, do not fear, come closer, come hither. And so this is a profound lesson about the Lord drawing us in through Maya, actually, as opposed to blocking us with Maya. It's a very different concept. We can see how Markandeya's features brighten with delight. His eyes grow wide like opening blossoms, and in humble surrender, he makes a bow, he prays, let me know the secret of your Maya, the secret of your apparition, now as a child, lying and playing in the infinite sea, Lord of the universe. And then ask, by what name are you to be known? I believe you to be the great being of all beings, for who else could exist as you exist? And it's interesting to see Vishnu's reply. He identifies himself, I am the primeval cosmic man, Narayana. What do we understand by that? See, Nara means man. It means that the whole of this universe is nothing more than this all-pervading presence. It's a sum totality of pure being. He is the waters, the first being, source of the universe, with 1,000 heads. 1,000 means unlimited, infinite heads. I manifest myself as the holiest of holy offerings. I manifest myself as the sacred fire that carries the offerings of men on earth to all the deities in heaven. And simultaneously, at the same time, I manifest myself as the Lord of waters, wearing the garb of Indra, king of gods. I am the foremost of the immortals. I'm the cycle of the year which generates everything and again dissolves it. I'm the divine yogi, the cosmic juggler or magician who works wonderfully tricks of delusion, the magical deceptions of the cosmic yogi and all the ages, all the yugas of the world. This display of the image or the mirage of the phenomenal process of the universe is the work of my creative aspect. But at the same time, I am the whirlpool. I'm the destructive vortex that sucks back whatever has been displayed and puts an end to the procession of the yugas. I put an end to everything that exists. My name is Death of the Universe also. And so from this self-revelation of Vishnu, it appears that Markandeya was actually far more privileged than the Lord Vishnu's own personal best devotee, Narada. And both sages are known to have plunged into the water that is the cosmic essence, the substantial part of Vishnu's Maya. Because you see, it all comes from water. We don't mean the water that you drink. We mean the allegory of an ocean. To each, the waters disclose the other side, the totally different aspect, and the totalizer, Alita. But Narada, who in his fervent devotion and loving surrender was apparently on such familiar terms with the God's secret essence, broke into another existence, another entanglement of earthly suffering and joy, but Markandeya did not. We can explore this story a little further, perhaps next week, and you can see that Markandeya was a holy person of a very different character to Narada. Contained within the world dream in the body is the best way of describing it, of the sleeping God. He was only one of many, many figures, yet was delighted to play the role as the ever-enduring saint pilgrim, gratified by the ideal state of human affairs. He had no obsessive craving to transcend the Maya spell. What a wonderful thing. He didn't wish to transcend it. He wished to penetrate the miracle of the mirage. And when Markandeya slipped, I should say, through the God's mouth, he fell out of existence, insofar as existence is understood and as far as it is bearable. And he finds himself confronted by what amounts to the great nothingness, the vast desert of the shoreless sea. The world familiar to him had vanished, and in sudden succession, he experienced two contradictory, incompatible aspects of the one essence, and his human mind failing to coordinate the two. So Vishnu taught him the identity of opposites, the fundamental unity of everything in God, stemming from his soul substance, thriving and perishing in God, all melts away again, and the only source. Now we'll pursue this further because this story is so profound, it gives us such an insight into the magic of Maya. Maya itself, of course, and magic, these are related terms, that we'll see, explore the depth of this particular story in more detail. What I've just been reading from, I should point out, is from Myths and Symbols in Indian Art and Civilization, that was edited by Joseph Campbell. It's originally put from Heinrich Zimmer. Heinrich Zimmer lived in he was born in 1890 and died in 1943. But he was at the opening of what would certainly have been the most productive period of his own career. And so it was Joseph Campbell, the great scholar, who picks this work up and completes it on his behalf. And so He's exploring the very beautiful depths of myths and symbols, particularly in Indian art and civilization. Well, we'll finish off then. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Thanks.
Thank you, Swamiji.
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 Om